Welcome to another episode Beyond Perception. I'm Simon, and it's my great joy to welcome Barry Sagotsky today here as my guest. And Barry, I'm sharing a brief introduction of you as you are a senior leadership and organization development consultant, a business consultant with, I believe, more than 40 years of experience. And your work is specialized on the intersection of strategy formulation and implementation, executive development, high performance teamwork, and process. Yes. And I'm pretty excited to have a conversation with you today. Welcome, Barry.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Simon. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, so we had off the record conversation just a couple of weeks ago to get to know each other. And for those of our listeners who don't have the context, I got introduced to you through Robert Fritz and Paul Reisler, which I both had as a guest on this podcast before. And you are, from what I know, part of the board of Paul's Kit Pan Alley initiative.
Yes, I am. I am.
Awesome. So
and I've been consulting with Paul for well over a year now. Yes, as well.
And I just shared in the brief introduction of yours, which don't give you justice. I know, and we will explore this. There's far more to uncover.
Let's see what we get to.
So what I would love to start with, so you have this extensive experience as a consultant, but then also with the creative process and structural consulting, specifically with organizations. And so what I'm curious about, did you work as a consultant before you were introduced to Robert Fritz and the creative process?
No, I met one of Robert's chief instructors in 1980 when I was working on a project for the U.S. Navy in Washington. And I hadn't been invited as one of 55 instructors that the Forum Corporation selected out of about 3,000 possible trainers to do this program for compliance with the Civil Service Reform Act that Jimmy Carter signed into law. So that the short version is that half of the salary increase for civilian employees in the entire U.S. government was based on merit and was no longer planned. So there's a little bit of change management, but what Kubers and Lybrand, who were the prime consultants to design the system, said, we will do it under the condition that you train everybody in how to do it, how to set goals, how to do performance appraisal. So we had a 2.5 day long, very precise program to teach. And it turned out that one of the first times I taught it, Colin Hammond, who I found out later was very, very close to Robert and one of his chief instructors in the original creative process program called DMA. And I co-taught with him, but he was doing some amazing things with the way he facilitated meetings, the way he got around. We were supposed to deliver one session for the submarine, headed by the submarine commander of the whole U.S. Navy, and many levels of security. And we had a regular identification, but they didn't know who we were. And Colin, with just a few words, he knew where he wanted to be, but he had his vision. We needed to get to the classroom the day before, and we knew where we were. And we got there within a few intersections, getting through all this tight military security to the classroom. And he did some other things. I said, how do you do that? And he said, well, I learned technology from Robert Fritz. And I said, oh, that's interesting. He described it to me at the time. I thought it was a bit strange. I wasn't that interested in pursuing it. Then I joined Janssen Pharmaceutica in 1982. And one of the people who was a consultant for me, who worked as part of the employee assistance program that I was managing, along with some other HR things, said, I've been studying with Robert Fritz. I said, oh, I know the name. Tell me about it. And I was interested enough to get my boss and several other HR people to a class in creating. That was transformational for me, to learn how I could be the prime creative force in my life. And my boss supported me in getting certified as an instructor, and the rest is history. I basically took every course over the last 40 years that Robert has offered, and certification in structural consulting, and pretty much the way I have as I do my foundational work. I'm always thinking in structure. I'm always asking questions related to structure. Whether I'm coaching a president of a $4 billion corporation or someone who wants to change jobs. That's a very short version. If you'd like to go in any more of the pieces, I'm glad to go anywhere you like.
Yeah, I guess I would love to hear a bit more about what you describe as transformational. So what did change as a result from adopting this process? And you mentioned structure and
Well,
questions relating to structure.
right. Well, I was for a lot of my life reacting and responding to circumstance. I was getting a lot of things done. I have a tremendous number of skill sets that I've pursued from time to time in martial arts, photography, et cetera. We've talked about some of them, and in business. And it was the basis was always trying to prove something about myself, to prove my worth or something else about me. And part of the transformation was a really understanding that I could make choices about creating what I wanted to create, and it was a much shorter route and more likely to succeed route in a faster way, utilizing Robert's technology for creating. And first, I learned it on a personal level, and then when he wrote the original version of the Path of Least Resistance for Managers, which was called Corporate Tides, around 1990 or so, maybe the late 80s. Then he put the whole thing in a business perspective, and that became even more important. And that transformed the way I did business strategy, from starting with the SWOT analysis or what's possible or interviews about issues, to moving to the simple question: if anything were possible, what do you want? And
that's
that
literally
is
how you start.
That's where I start. It's now I can, after I determine with a coaching client or with a team or with a strategy session, where do you want to be if anything were possible? And I do have some exercises to teach people about visioning. And then I can go into what's the reality, what are your issues, what's keeping you up awake at night in a cold sweat, et cetera. But then we still have that anchor of, if anything were possible, what do you want? And ultimately, in most cases, in virtually all cases, I'll help people build a plan for what they actually want, what their aspiration really is, what the culture is that they want, what the financial results are that they want. And then we can back off on the plan. Once they have a bulletproof plan for getting what they want, they might say, well, we don't want to get these resources together. We don't want to apply this amount of resource to doing that, or I don't want to spend the time in this area if it's an individual. I said, okay, well, now that you know that you can get what you want if you did all these things, modify it, change it. You still want what you want. The point, one of the points is, whether you say it or not, whether you discover it or not, whether you clarify it or not, you want what you want. That's true for everybody. And quite often people know what they don't want, and sometimes don't even know that. And in rare cases, people actually don't know what they want, but I've found that to be very, very rare in my experience. But I also don't go digging for it. If somebody says, I don't know, then they don't know. It's a matter of making choices in favor of, and plans in favor of getting what you want, given where you are. And that current reality, that where you are part, I cover with a small set of questions relevant to the end result or the vision or your aspiration, your values, what you want. What do you have and not have? What do you know and what don't you know? And that don't you know question is incredibly powerful, because a lot of people don't even ask that. So if you don't know what you don't know, your plan is likely not to include find out about what you don't know. So that's a big missing piece for a lot of folks. Who's on your side, who's not on your side? That doesn't necessarily mean they're against you. It's who are the stakeholders you have to have in order for you to be successful in getting what you want. Who are the stakeholders that need to be informed? Who are the stakeholders that need to be influenced? Who are the stakeholders that need to stay out of the way to get what you want? What are the patterns? What are the trends of what's going on? Is there anything in reality that's not in your favor or inadequate right now, and the trend would be getting better or staying the same or getting worse. And from that, there's other technologies that Robert's invented, like so-called digital decision-making, that enable you to do scenarios so that you can look at something while doing planning and saying, this is a relevant piece of my structure for this decision. And my capacity for management is either adequate or inadequate. And it's either getting better, staying the same, or getting worse. And I can put that with other factors like the finances. They're either adequate or inadequate, getting better, staying the same, getting worse. That's just a simple 2 and 3, which is another way to call it. And by putting a map of that together, and then you can say, if you had this and not this and this and not this, would the answer to your decision be yes or no? That's another quick example of a structural approach. Is that clear, or do I need to put more detail into that?
So I do have a little bit of context, so I can follow you. And what I notice as the key, probably differentiator to other approaches, is that you start with a vision, and it is not necessarily informed by where you are right now, the current circumstances.
That's second. Yeah, if you want to do so-called structural tension, the anchor is the vision. The anchor is what you want, and it's your choice, and it's a free choice. Some people don't think they're free to make choices, and that's a limiting factor. In reality, everybody is. What they choose to do, and whether they choose to get there, and whether they have the structure that enables them to more adequately get there or not. I know. Have you had a podcast with Robert? Have you done?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Oh, sure. So some listeners will remember that
yes.
There's 2 types of organizations. There's organizations that advance and organizations that oscillate. And the oscillating one's like a rocking chair, and the organizations that advance are like a car. So I'm firmly in the car lane of organizations, and but really, as a consultant, as a coach, I am always in the business of noticing and helping my clients see where they are in terms of any rocking chairs that might be existing.
And just for brief context, would you briefly mind explaining what's the oscillating structure and what's the advancing structure for those of us who might not have the context, very briefly?
Yeah, very briefly. An oscillating structure is the behavior of an organization or an individual is dependent on the structure. The river flows through the riverbed and doesn't go randomly around. The structure of the riverbed, except when the capacity is overcome with flood, the river goes a certain way. The streets, for those who are who have been to Boston, in the old city, in the old original city, are very twisty, for example. And the reason for that is the original paths were done by cows, and if cows are walking along, and the ground is uneven, if this side is higher than the other, they would move. If the left side is higher than the right, they would move toward the right for a couple of steps. And if the ground was a little higher and the right side was higher than the left, they'd move the other way. So the road curves based on the terrain of the land. The structure creates the behavior. And then they eventually paved them in different ways, but they left them that way. They didn't straighten out the streets until they expanded beyond the fundamental city. Now, in people, the oscillating behavior is due to something called structural conflicts. The simplest one that Robert uses and I use also is that first of all, tension seeks resolution. So in terms of food, if you're hungry is tension, the resolution of that is to eat. If some people keep eating without respect to the calories they're taking in or the nature of the food, and sooner or later they become overweight, whatever that means to them. And that tension of being overweight has a different resolution, which is to diet or not eat. And the conflict is that you can't eat and not eat at the same time. Mm-hmm. You have 2 conflicting tension resolution systems. So if you're dieting, physiologically, your body says, I'm starving, and you get hungry. So it's like having a person, let's say it's a person again, and there's two unbreakable rubber bands. One side is eating and the other side is dieting. And the more the person moves toward dieting, the more tension there is in the structure of hunger being the tension, and the person moves back in that direction. Now, this has time delays in it. Sometimes it's days, weeks, months, and then it goes back and forth. And there's different ways that people manage this. But if that's the structure, that's the way it's going to oscillate. Organizations workload capacity is not up to the workload. Workload exceeds capacity on an organization level. The tension there is resolved. It's often by hiring more people. There's also productivity things you can do. There's process things you can do. But let's say it's hire more people. The more people you hire, the more it costs the organization. So the other tension system that's in play in this conflict, structural conflict, is that the finances are too high, personnel costs are too high. Resolution of that is to lay off people. So you'll notice organizations hire people, upsize, downsize, upsize, downsize, upsize, downsize over time. And that's the same as a rocking chair going back and forth. The same is true with organizational change. The same is true with a lot of things. You know, the need for change results in a desire for change. Then you change. The desire for continuity leads to don't change. You can't change and not change. So it's one step forward, two steps back. How's that for the definition?
I think that's awesome. Yeah, fantastic. And you also mentioned you work with individuals.
Yes,
initially,
I do.
I said you do executive coaching, but then you also work with organizations. Is there a difference between facilitating change with individuals and with organizations?
In terms of the way I work, not much. In terms of the way their real constraints in terms of finances or capacity or capabilities or competence, yes. And with individuals, there's let's go individual and team for a contrast that might help. With a team, I'm facilitating the discussion, the clarity between people in terms of their roles, responsibilities, in terms of their commitment to the team, in terms of their willingness and ability to be transparent, their level of trust for others. In the order of, trust leads to openness, leads to conflict, so different points of view come out and can be discussed, leads to possibility for commitment to the team, leads to accountability for the performance of all the team members, calling others out, leads to and consistent with focus on the goals. That's really that's right from the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which is a popular thing about high performing teams.
That's interesting because when you mentioned transparency or trust, when I look back at my own corporate experience, that wasn't one of the top priorities. So, how do you facilitate it? How do you inspire people to be transparent or to guide them to be truthful or create trust among each others?
Well, it goes back to the thing about what's known and what's not known in a different framework, in a different format. If someone doesn't trust someone else, the other person knows that through the nonverbal as well as some verbal. Even if they're not willing to say it, it becomes obvious in terms of the amount of feedback that's given, the amount of proaction that people take with each other, the utility of the information, the willingness to explore the issues and interests of the other party. I mean, there's evidence in a number of levels, visual and nonverbal, that you can pick up. And besides the words, as you know, are only part of the message. So with an individual, it varies obviously person to person. But if someone is, this goes to a negotiation that I teach, principle of negotiation. I do a lot of work in pharmaceutical clinical research and device clinical research and biotech clinical research. I also teach negotiation at the FDA. And the foundation is, first of all, the other person believes they're right in a negotiation. And if you don't get that, you're not going to do negotiation very well. So your job as a participant, and this still stays with the trust, your job is to find out why the other party believes they're right. And that's your main job. That's my main job when I'm negotiating. In order to do that, I have to identify all the issues, all the concerns, as well as all the values and aspirations of the other party. So I spend a lot of time in so-called issue identification. So this is what I teach people when I'm coaching them. This is what I do when I'm teaching negotiation. This is what I do when I'm negotiating in teams or consulting on negotiation in teams. And it's a difficult thing for people who think negotiation goes immediately to bargaining. Let's give and take. Let me tell them what I'm interested in. And starting with, how's your day going? A little bit of small talk.
Mm-hmm.
How was your ride here in the olden days? Mm-hmm. How's your Zoom technology working today? Tell me what's, it could be with issues like what's keeping you up at night in a cold sweat, or a variation on that. Or I can ask about aspirations. If anything were possible, what would you like to have happen in this? So I can know their aspirations, their interests, and I'll keep going. Tell me, what else is important? Why is that important? Becomes a good secondary follow-up question. Once I know that they're interested in time of completion of a particular deliverable. So why is that important to you? What happens if things are not delivered on time? And I find out consequences for them in their words as a personal thing for them. And the more I'm interested in and show not only the interest, but understanding what they're talking about. And that's active listening in this case is the skill set. So it's good questioning, active listening, feeding back, not just parroting what they're saying, but really demonstrating understanding. The obstacle I find a lot of people have when I talk about this particular set of skills, this questioning and active listening, is they say, well, if I show them that I understand, then I'm agreeing with them. So a key corollary to the principle is that understanding does not equal agreement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's a tough thing for a lot of people to get. Mm-hmm. Once they say, I understand you and here's what you're interested in, that does not mean, unless you agree with them, in which case go right ahead. Mm-hmm. But mm-hmm. I find often people don't ask the questions because they're worried about the answer being something they won't agree with. The answer is the answer, whether you know it or not. That also goes back to what do you know and what don't you know? So this is finding out what you don't know, which will help you in the end result a settlement that'll be agreeable and satisfying to both parties. So that's the foundations for that are the answer to your question. What do I work with people in terms of building trust? Trust is the foundation of a high-performing team, of performance, of leadership, of anything to do inside and outside business, but it's incredibly important in business because so much of the business is transactional and a lot of the most important business is influential. In other words, you don't have control over someone and you need to get them to do something while you have no power over them in the organization to get them to do it. Cross-functional teams, for example, or cross functions in particular. Make sense?
It makes absolutely sense, and I can totally see the difficulty one might have of like really understanding someone. I can see that this is a skill or something you kind of have to work towards to be able to understand someone fully without collapsing into their perspective or resisting their perspective, but just
it's really it's interesting because you're actually getting closer to the person. Because they're being more and more open to you, and you by doing this are also being somewhat open to them by focusing on them rather than on you, remembering that each party thinks they're right. And the time people get to do that, and it's always too soon, in my opinion, in a negotiation is, okay, we've got all the issues. Now let me talk about what I want.
But
You know,
that's kind of default mode of interacting in our
yeah.
world. I mean, if I
Well,
can
the
propose
joke
this
about that is,
at a generalization, yeah.
of course, the joke is, well, that's all I have to say about me. What do you think about me? It's like, if all the focus is on me, you're not going to get anywhere in an agreeable collaboration with someone else. So once you have things that are there, and some of the things don't quite line up, that's where managing conflict comes in. And conflict is based on in four areas in my experience, and these are increasing difficulty to resolve. Again, this is all in foundation to building trust. There are differences in facts that are there, which is what's reality, what's going on. Differences in goals, where are we going? Differences in methodology, or how do we get there? And differences in values, which are the most difficult, because that's the beliefs. They're conceptual, that people think this is right. And you can say because, but this is just right. This is a personal thing. It could be organizational thing too. Organizations have sets of culture and values that go along with things, and that's where people conflict when there's an acquisition of one company to another, and the cultures are very different. One is very informal, another is very formal. One has 4 discrete levels of process that specifically would let's get it done, et cetera, et cetera. But the reasons for these differences in terms of facts and goals and methods and values are threefold. One is information. You and I have different information, or different sets or parts of the same information pool. So therefore, we will have conflict. We're both right, but we're looking at different stuff. Another is perception. Like if I were to say, I don't know how this works on the video. I have 5 fingers here. Which side is my thumb on from your view? Now, it might be flipped in here, but if you were actually sitting in the room opposite me, you would say, it's on your right. I say, no, this thumb is on my left. And we'd both be right. So the perception can be different just by the way we look at it. And the third is a variation on that, which is because of my role, because I'm in regulatory, because I'm in senior leadership, because I'm in finance. I have to look at this information this way, or I tend to look at information this way. So that combination of things turns out to be a very valuable toolkit. Where do we differ? Do we differ on facts, goals, methods, and values? And if we differ on more than one, let's go to the simpler level first, and then resolve that, and then we can work our way up. Values are incredibly difficult to resolve, but you can get to a point. At least in my experience, I've been able to understand another person's values and let them really see and experience that I understand them, even though I disagree with them.
And if you are managing conflict or mediating conflicts, and you just shared a couple of examples of what that might look like, is that through communication, to talking, bringing them together and having them share their perspectives and
and
make it visible what the difference is?
Oh yeah, sometimes I'll chart it. So other times I'll just stop person and say, well, it's almost like couples counseling. What do you hear? What do you understand? What did you get out of that? Okay, summarize that and give it to the other person. Did they get it right? That a large example of this, when I used to do, I'd had a custom diversity program that I managed to get funded, and I led while I was at Sharing Plow. And this was diversity as a business issue. It's differentiated from equal employment opportunity and affirmative action. So diversity is a business issue. Diversity has a lot of things. It's beyond race and gender, as Roosevelt Thomas said, wrote many books about, and others wrote books about. So anyway, on the second day of this, after people were more trusting of each other, having been through activities, having done a lot of discussions, made a lot of decisions to see where their biases were, I did a so-called fishbowl, where I broke the group into 2. And one group was the in group and the other group was the out group. And sometimes it was the marketing and business sides of the business and the research and development side. Sometimes it was gender. Sometimes it was else. Those are the 2 main differentiating groups that I had. And then I separated them and I had them discuss one thing, and then I brought them into a room and I changed it on them a little bit. And I had the group, I put the group that was designated as inside the fishbowl. The fishbowl is concentric circles of chairs with no tables or anything. And one group sits in a circle inside a larger circle of the other group. So they're in the inside group is in a fishbowl. The outside group doesn't say anything, doesn't snicker, doesn't chuckle, doesn't say anything. And then there's a discussion in the one group about and the preparation was what it's like to be a member of your group. In the fishbowl was what's it like to be a member of the other group, to see what they actually thought or knew about this. And they got 5 or 10 minutes or whatever I gave them, probably more than 10 minutes, to say what it was. And then I said, and now the in-group can't talk about this. In the outer group, those outside the fishbowl, what did they get right? And what did they miss? And then we switched. And that's a one type of a group example of doing that same sort of thing, is facilitating people having discussions. And at that point in the 2-day session, near the middle of the second day, they were comfortable enough to do that. Let's say it's early on in something and people are not willing to share, to raise issues that would be conflicting. I might say, this change is happening, and I'll have 3 charts on the wall in different places in the room, back when we used to have live meetings in rooms. And I'll say, if you are absolutely certain we'll be successful with the change, I want you to go by that chart, by affinity. If you're not quite so sure, go to that chart. And if you think it's going to be disastrous, go to that chart. But that's extreme in this case. I usually don't have them labeled that bad. It's like good, medium, not so good. And then they get to talk about why they got there. And they're surprised to find in these groups that they went there for different reasons. In the end, they have different parts of the issue that they're concerned about or in favor of. And then the discussion becomes easier because I can ask one group, what did your group come up with, without identifying who said it? So once the topic's on the table, I can then say, so what do the rest of you think? So all I need is a starter. And I can give people a relatively safe place to discuss what it is in teams. That's just another quick technique to get people going.
So it's kind of the same principle here again. You have a vision of creating trust, transparency, and then you're just taking the people where they are currently to step by step get them there.
Well, I'm opening the door. They can walk through or not. It's and one thing I understand is that they're free to do whatever they want, and I have no control over them. And that's a tough thing for a lot of people to understand. That's one of the transformational things I got early on in studying Robert Fritz's work. And that's purely conceptual thing. And at this point, if I think I can control somebody, I come back to the reality. Nope, can't. Are they free? Absolutely, they can do whatever they want. I've been through the discussion enough times, been proved enough times to me through my having consultations as a subject of the consult. A lot of people don't get that. They anytime I hear in my consulting, they ought to, or I should, that's the conceptual land that they're in. And it's not something that unless somebody wants to go there and in a corporate situation, and there are very few people do, because that's not usually what I'm contracted to do. I can do personal structural consulting, but there are ways as an executive coach, not going into the Fritz structural consulting model, that I can ask a lot of questions that people will still get to reality and move from a position where here's what I ought to do to I have choices, and I can make choices, and I can take actions that I want to take.
Would you say that, I mean, that's what we now talked a little bit about, how to create trust or transparency among teams, is that one of the most problematic things, or the usual situation when you start working with an organization? Or what would you say, what do most organizations get wrong? What are the missing priorities, or what are the things most organizations would benefit from implementing? Or
a lot of organizations have a business strategy that's based on what's possible, and therefore the whole organization is I work a lot in biopharmaceuticals, and a lot of my career has been in biopharmaceuticals, true, but I consult in financial services, I consult in food, I consult in beverage, I consult in transportation, in infrastructure, in engineering, a variety of areas, in healthcare deliveries, large hospital systems. And the most common thing, some of the most common things are that the strategy is not clear. There are mission statements all over the place, but there are very few missions. People don't understand their purpose, and I specifically state, what's the purpose of your organization? Why do you exist? How do you create wealth? What's your job in all this? People don't get that strategic connection. I'm writing a book currently on the difference between managers and leaders in clinical research, very specific area, but a very costly, very important area of research for devices, for biotechnology, for pharmaceuticals. Leaders are more strategic. Leaders have a vision in mind all the time. People who have the competencies of leaders do things through influencing, for example. And managers, on the other hand, are more tactical. They get it done. They're spending the money. They got their nose down, looking down the organization. And some leaders act like managers. And some leaders, even though they're strategic and they know what the strategy is, don't communicate that to managers and below. So there's a disconnect. Now that exacerbates the performance of an organization when it's not clear what the roles and responsibilities of the management strategy are between functions in an organization. There's sometimes things don't get done at all. Sometimes two or more organizations think that they're responsible or accountable for something. So the conflicts arise. They're not adept at negotiating or conflict management. So all these pieces come together so that understanding the competencies of a leader and the competencies of a manager. Some people think they got promoted to leadership because they're really good managers. It's just like some supervisors or managers think they ought to keep doing what got them the promotion into that, but it's a different role. So the summary is that the strategy and tactics are two different things. Organizations that perform better have clarity in the strategy, in my experience, all the way down through the organization. And, anybody can tell you, going back to that Navy experience I mentioned where I met Colin, where I first got in touch with Robert's work, the Navy had something I use as the standard for the best possible mission statement that can be created. The mission for the Navy in 1980, I don't know if it's the same, was simple. 2 words: fleet readiness. So if you were doing something while you're refitting a nuclear submarine or training or serving food, if it didn't provide that particular part of the defense force was ready to go, you weren't doing your job. I haven't found concise mission statements as good as that. Johnson & Johnson has a wonderful the values set of statements called the Credo, done by General Johnson in the 1940s. And I had the pleasure of working on a small group that put together a survey process that they're still using today, which surveys every employee worldwide as to how aligned their company at all levels is with the Credo. And the Credo has 4 parts. Our first responsibility is to customers, patients, doctors, nurses, parents, etc. That's about a paragraph of employees, and there's a paragraph about that. Third responsibility to the community is a paragraph about that. And the fourth responsibility is to stockholders, and there's a paragraph. In that order. customers, employees, community, stockholders. They have figured to this day, if we take care of the first three, that fourth will take care of itself. That's how they made the decisions in the 1980s about the Tylenol poisonings. They had their first press conference ever, and the CEO at the time, Jim Burke, had a very quick board meeting, and they said, first responsibilities to patients, pull the product. There was no question about that. Now, later on, they made some other questionable things that didn't exactly follow that, but they corrected them. I'm still a fan of that. Now, there's suits against them for different things these days, but in terms of a set of values, everybody in the company, if they don't have a copy of it on their wall at some time or another when they do the survey, gets to know what the values of the whole organization are, and they get to see how well it's applied at the local level in over 200 companies that make up Johnson & Johnson today. So that's an extreme case. Largest healthcare company in the world, largest organization in the federal government. The same thing's true in smaller organizations. If you don't know why your company exists, you don't have an anchor, which is just as important as the vision financially and culturally, where the leadership has decided the company will be in 2, 4, 8, 10, 100 years.
What you said before, you had a transformational experience from really learning the creative process. And from my own experience, I started being curious about creativity, creating a couple of years ago. And it, depending where one starts, it can take some time to transfer that into an actual understanding, or to start getting the things or connecting the things. When you work with individuals or organizations, do you teach the actual process, or is it more a facilitating of that process without people really having the need to understand what's happening?
Most of the time, I teach the process, especially to teams. I have a short presentation that talks about the rocking chairs, cars, and structural tension, and what structural conflict looks like, and there's a set of questions that Robert came up with, the business questions about what's our offering, who are our customers, what do they want, what do we want, et cetera. Is there a match between? I use that same set of questions hundreds of times in the last 30 years while doing business strategy. It's just a foundational piece for me, and people get to know. And this is from organizations like within J&J, Sharing Plow. I did business strategy throughout Western Eastern Europe and through North America. I've done strategy for Bloomberg, different parts of Bloomberg in the past, for L'Oreal, for parts of Mars. It's the same thing. It's just the way I think at this point, because the rest of it doesn't make as much sense. and I've been doing leadership training and management training. I owned a company for 25 years that sold training videos and films originally. And so I got to see all the top thinkers and key opinion leaders from 1973 to 1988. I had access to every video that was a business video file, and I got to meet and talk to Peter Drucker, for example, and others at that level. It's Robert Fritz's technology is the best thing I've ever come across, and it's not that I don't learn other things from reading, because I read all the time, but I haven't found anything better in terms of supporting my work and supporting the work of the people I consult with. There's a sales pitch for it, which I'll give you any time. But it's for me, it's true.
Yeah. And I mean, from what you're sharing, and also what I got to know for myself, it seems to really come back to first principles, to making things as simple as possible, and to keep yourself with that simplicity. Would you agree to that statement, that's a differentiator for success?
I love the way Robert used to put it. He said, "I'm lazy. I really don't want to spend any extra energy creating that I have to, or something to that effect." and it's and I have so many things I want to do. Right. I just I don't do it often, but I fly fish, and I got into that through Garrison Krause, who was doing a video of Robert, and I got to meet him. We got friendly. He's a fly. I always wanted to learn fly fishing, so I got into, like I always do, fly tying, fly rod building. So when I was on vacation last week in Martha's Vineyard, I used a fly rod that I built, flies that I tied, and with one fly I caught well over 30 fish in an hour and a half. So it was interesting creating the results that I was able to, and we really sold the fish. I'm not interested in keeping any. I'm just interested in the technique and the precision and the relaxation, the zen of the motion and the balance in the boat, and being able to technically do what I want to do. But the fly worked well. My friend and guide said, what? Here's your fly that you used. It's all torn up. And I said, would you like some? So I just went down. I knew that I wanted to share it with him. So I tied, 4 of these this morning. So I knew what I wanted to do. I knew when I wanted to have it done. I had the meeting with you. I had several other meetings. I went down, finished it. That part's done. But that doesn't mean I can't start something. I've got a guitar that I'm building, and I'm sanding the body of it. It's a kit, and I can put that aside. I know where I left off. As long as the creative process lets you stop something, and as long as you know where you are and know where you're going, you can pick it up right away without any lost time. I know exactly where I left it. I still know where I'm going because it's the same thing. I know what it's going to look like when it's done. In terms of a team, I know where I'm going in terms of 3 things. The quality of the decisions that are going to be made. And this is something I recommend to people for any meeting. Before you go in, think of 3 things and make a choice if you want to. The quality of decisions. You want great decisions, adequate decisions, or poor decisions. People don't choose poor decisions, but it's in there for completeness. The quality of the relationship. Do you want it better, the same, or worse than when you walked in? And the condition of the parties. Do you want that better, the same, or worse when you walked into the meeting? So it's decisions, relationship, people. And I start off, and if I'm doing a 2-day thing, a 5-day thing, a 1-hour meeting, I know at the end of it that those are 3 things that I've made a choice about before I go into it. And I will adjust my questions, my amount of pressing, my amount of listening, my amount of engaging, or whatever. And it's automatic. I don't have these written in front of me. At this point, it's automatic. It helps when people are starting out. I tell it, write it down, then put it away, and you can look at it afterwards and see if you got it. And everybody says they always get it. So it just making the choice and writing it down is all you need. I did that answer some of your question there?
Absolutely. And when you shared about fly fishing, that might be a great opportunity to touch a few of your other passions. And what you shared when we had our initial conversations, that you were a creator long before you started learning the officially the creative process. And you also told me that your friends call you the Renaissance figure, and you have a diverse set of interests and passions and skill sets. And one of those is, from what I know, martial arts, which you have been practicing for more than 50 years. You have a black belt in karate.
Well, 6-degree black belt. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Amazing. And I'd love
my
to
students are all black belts. Yeah. I only teach at that level now. Yeah.
What's your fascination about it? What is karate about?
Well, for me, it's a lot of things. It's the precision of it's something that I can never be perfect at, and it's also the Zen part of that, and it's internal for me at this point. A lot of karate is forceful and external for people. At this point, it's quite internal, and my calmest moments are when I'm fighting with somebody, because I'm totally at the moment. There's nothing else in the world going on. And I just find it, I can have a conversation while I'm fighting with my students and suggest things for them to do, and well, still automatically moving and doing things. But it's also, well, it's physical fitness for me. I'm 77 years old. I need to be flexible. I'm currently losing some of the excess weight that I have. Well, my gravity enhancement, as I like to call it, is going away. But the recently got into it because someone physically threatened me and was reliably believable that he was and he was armed as well. So I went to my original karate teacher and I said, teach me. And he said, why do you want to learn? I said, somebody's threatening me. He said, go buy a gun. You can't learn anything quick enough, and bullets go further than your arms can. I said, no, I really have always wanted to learn this. It's been something I always wanted to pick up, and I embraced it, and it was difficult, and I found out through that a lot about fear, and that and the corresponding thing with fear is courage. Courage for me is about being afraid of something and doing it anyway. For many years, for the first 10 to 20 years, most of the time when I stepped out to fight with somebody, particularly higher rank, I was scared. But once I got there, I stepped over this line in the ring. There was no fear, because then I've lost when I start. Before I start, I'd be crouching and ducking rather than engaging. And fighting for me it's more like dancing than anything else. I'm with the other person. That's one thing I get from karate and I bring to consulting is I'm with the other person. I'm totally with the other person. I'm focused only on them. I'm not thinking about what I'm having for dinner. I'm not thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to say to influence them to do something. It's wherever they are at the moment, I'm with them, which creates trust, which creates, the people that choose to work with me want to do business better. People who want conceptual things, I know that. I'm not willing to do that. I'm not going to talk about conceptually how certain competencies are, but I'm willing to train somebody who wants to learn if we find that out. So I do coaching where I ask questions, consulting where I make recommendations, and teaching where they have skills that they need. But going back to martial arts, I can't imagine not doing it. I'm always looking for ways to refine what I know. There's I would say studying Okinawan style. There are 2 Okinawan weapons that I don't know as well. I'm starting at my age currently to learn how to use them more efficiently. So I have 3 weapons that I currently work with, but there's 2 more that I will. Same thing with anything else. With fly fishing, that I only do it a couple or a few times a year, but I have enough technique that I can pick it up again very quickly, and I want to always do better that time. I've been playing a lot of golf lately, and I dropped 10 strokes off my handicap this year alone. So then I go and practice, and I practice, and I practice, and I understand. For me, it's situational now. Wherever I happen to be, I have to figure the strategy of what I'm going to do, just like a business. I still have the goal. It's much like 2 things. Golf and strategy are similar as are guided missiles. You say, I want to get to the hole. Well, there's a straight shot. I rarely hit a straight shot. So does everybody else. If I still said, okay, I'm going to hit whatever second shot I plan to do, I'm going to be further off the hole. I have to readjust. So how do I get to the hole in the fewest possible strokes? There's a story that I used to sell John Cleese's films, the Monty Python guy who had a whole series of business films, and I got to spend some time with him, which was great. And he had a story about Gordon the guided missile, and the question was, when is a guided missile on target? And it's only at the very last moment. All the rest of the time is corrections, but it knows what the target is. And strategy is, you know what the target is, and you're always making corrections. And once people get to know that, and then it requires constantly updating current reality, consistently looking at all the things you know and don't know, all that same part of current reality, and getting your strategic insights in order and modified and changing your plan as you have to get the results you want when you want it. So that's a long way of karate plus some other things to why is that important to me. And they're all important for similar reasons. I find inner peace I find a lot of satisfaction in helping others do better, and mostly helping businesses do better. Like you talked about Paul Reiser's business. I met Paul at one of Robert's 5-day workshops on creating for artists over a decade ago. And we hit it off then, and he called me up recently and said, would you help? And I love to work with not-for-profit organizations because it helps them do better. I love to work with hospitals because they get to do better. I love to work with, I did anybody I work with. If they do better, their organization does better. My focus in coaching is about the business contribution they can make, because that's what they pay me to do, among other things. It's not just to make the person feel good. It's to make them more productive. As a side effect of that, they usually are more competent, more confident, more comfortable, more trustable, in that they're more open.
When you just said it brings me inner peace, that might at first be a contradiction to what you said before. It's a continuous process of improvement, of optimization, which one might, without much context,
I embrace change.
This doesn't feel so peaceful. It's a continuous effort to put
no. Anytime if you're in the creative process, change is embraced. Current reality changes. You still want what you want. Say, oh, I've discovered this. Isn't that wonderful? I have to do this differently. Isn't that wonderful? I'm still going to get what I want. It may take extra or different effort or different direction or less or more of something, but it's wonderful knowing where I am as all the time.
Makes a lot of sense. But myself,
it takes a while to get there.
Myself, a couple of years ago, it would have thought like, well, this is weird. Like,
well, a lot of people will think that. I'm just telling you what my experience is, and for some that are listening or watching this, it's going to be weird. And just, I can tell you, I'm telling the truth. I relax when I'm playing golf. I relax when I'm fishing. I relax when I'm doing karate. I relax when I'm doing any of my other hobbies.
Which is one of them is you being a magician, right?
I'm a magician as well. Yeah. I've been doing that for over 40 years as well.
What kind of magic do you practice?
It's close up for the most part. Cards, coins, that sort of thing. But I'll do some so-called parlor magic. I do a workshop on facilitation skills, and the illustrations I use are all magic. For example, I do an effect called the invisible deck. It's a popular trick. You can buy it in a magic shop. But the effect is this. I have a particular pattern that I use, and I've worked it out over the decades. So this is it. I say I have a deck of cards here. I reach into my pocket and I pull out nothing. Say, this is an invisible deck of cards. Can you see it? Some people say yes. I say, how can you possibly see it's invisible? And I said, and it's an invisible deck of cards. I need a volunteer. You have to be willing to work with me on this. And I'll tell you in advance, you may feel silly. And somebody raises their hand finally, and I'll say, I want you to catch this. I'm going to throw you the deck of cards in the box. And then they throw it, and they make a motion of catching it. So, okay, now follow these instructions carefully. Take the cards out of the box. And they mimic taking the cards. Hand the box to someone near you. Fine. Say, okay, shuffle them up. I hate to work with a stacked deck. Shuffle the cards.
Yeah.
And I say, okay, fan through the cards and make sure it's complete. I always like to work with a full deck. It's not always possible. It's joke. Joker and 52 regular cards, you can count them or trust me. And some people start counting, and so you don't trust me. It doesn't matter. Whatever happens, I go along with. So you're not feeling silly at this point, are you? And some people say yes, some say no. At least look, you got something to do. The person next to you is holding an empty box. Feel good. So I said, I'm going to turn my back for the next part. Please don't try this at home. I turn my back. I say, take any card you want out of the deck. Notice it. Show it around. Don't tell anybody, but show it around. And then take that card and only that card, turn it upside down, put it anywhere in the deck, shuffle them up again so I can't possibly find it, and put them back in the box. And I won't watch. And I turn around, and it's giggling and joking going on because people are mimicking or just shuffling, turning the card, show the card around, put it in the box. And then they say, okay, now toss the box with the turned around card. Remember what the card is to me. I'll catch it in this pocket. So I hold, they usually wear a suit jacket. hold the pocket open, they throw it, I go, boom, and I pull out a deck of cards to a round of applause. What have I done? I've talked to the audience. I've told them about something. I pull a deck of cards out of my jacket and I get a round of applause. So isn't that amazing? I made an invisible thing visible. So I say, okay, what was the card you turned over? And then they tell me what the card was. And I very slowly open the box. They take the deck out to show that the box is empty. And I fan the cards out slowly. And one card is turned over. And I pull the card that's turned over out. And it's their card that they've selected. And they go, wow, it's amazing. Then I put them back in the deck. I say, like we could have figured something out. Somebody else, what card would you have turned over? Somebody calls a different card. That card's turned over. I said, okay, let's see what you learned from this in terms of engaging people and how much you remember as a group of what I did. And I say, okay, we're going to repeat this, but all of you together are going to do my patter. And they get it 100% of the time, down to the little jokes and everything in order. What's next, what's next, what's next. And those that weren't paying as close attention get to notice what they got or what they missed through it. And this time I do it with an oversized deck of cards, and the card that they throw back is turned over in the oversized deck. So it's slightly different. At the end, they get a little bit of it. They didn't just mimic me. They got another trick out of it. So that's giving direction, facilitation, building trust, engaging. And, I can, as I debrief that, like how many of you are really seeing something that wasn't real? How many of you would like your audiences and your groups you're facilitating to pay that kind of attention? So here's some things to do. And then there's other stuff about that I do. So that's one of the dozen pieces I do. Here's a principle, here's some magic. And the visual stuff sticks with people. Memory is visual. So people years later will come up to me and say, I remember when you did this, in some cases 10 years ago. Yeah, so I have fun with that too. And I'm still learning new magic. I don't have as much chance through COVID to practice with people anymore. So I have like 100 or 150 tricks stacked up that I want to do. But I'm practicing a little bit. But I have a regular repertoire of 40 or 50 that I can do anytime. Yep, I'm in a Society of American Magicians, so I go to meetings with other magicians and
what's the? I'm not sure if that's existing, but what's the one thing which makes a great magician?
Oh, it's different for different people. There's different kinds of magic, but it's the connection with the audience is for me. I do it to enjoy the experience with people. I do not like people who are out to fool other people. I do not like people who are separate from the audience, who watch me perform. Jeff McBride is in my opinion, one of the greatest magicians in the world. In many's opinions, he's won Magician of the Year a number of times. He has an act in Las Vegas, and he's got the fastest hands in magic. But regardless of whether it's 10 people or 10,000 people, he's connected to the audience, and he does that. David Copperfield, who actually taught me some of my first magic tricks. He was he grew up in Metuchen. I was in New Brunswick at the time, right next to it in New Jersey. And he used to hang out at the magic shop where I first started learning magic. So he taught me some things when he was a teenager back when. But he connects in a different way. He does these large performances. But if you watch any of his performances, it's about you, the spectator. And that's for me what it's about. It's not performing for like Cirque du Soleil is their performance. You're not really engaged with them. You might be engaged with the story, and a good magician, in my opinion, just personally connects with you in some way. And that street magicians do it obviously one-on-one, but I'm talking about people who do it for a small group of people or a slightly larger group of people.
Is that then also one of the key principles which you share with the participants and you're facilitating workshops?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's I keep making the point about who am I talking to, and everybody raises their hands. Who am I working with? And all the hands go up, because that's what I do. I'm not the early facilitation training I got was look over this side, look over here, look over to the other side, look over here, and look. No, I actually spend time with a person, and I'll spend time with another person. I'll spend time with someone else. And there are specific individuals I'm paying attention to when I'm speaking, whether it's 400 people or 20 people. So it's connecting. It's like paying attention. It's a variation on the negotiation. Everybody thinks they're right. Everybody wants to be noticed. Everybody wants to be participating. Well, in my opinion. Well, I don't know if they are or aren't until I ask them. But when I do connect with people, they seem to enjoy it. Nobody's so far complained about it.
Is that in the end a simple choice to do that?
For me?
Or in general, if someone listening to that, or like, oh yeah, I want to connect deeper with my audience, what would you say to them? How
one
could one do
and
that?
I'm not in control of them. So I'm here in my job, whatever it is. If I'm doing a keynote speech, it's to condense certain thoughts to get people thinking about a particular topic so that for the rest of the conference day or conference, they will have that top of mind. So that will be a content part of their discussions of what they're learning from there on. If I'm doing a workshop, it's what can they take back either on the job or home. I mean, the skills I teach in negotiation in particular, conflict management or change, are applicable anywhere. So my hope, my intention is that they get something that they can use. I'm not at all in this is an interesting thing, let's think about this. This is not a philosophical discussion. This is pragmatic. If you can't get it and use it or learn to use it, to me, it's not as valuable. Might be interesting, but it's not as valuable.
This is a very, very great conversation. I'm enjoying it very much.
I'm enjoying it. Yeah, thank you.
I know time is running out. I think you have another appointment soon. So I would love to ask, is there something you still you think is missing or important from your point of view to share with the audience or us listening, something dear to your heart, which you want to add to what you already shared with us?
It's the thing I would ask everyone who's listening to do is to be open to learning, to be open to other ideas, to understand them, even if they disagree, to explore why others think they're right. If people take nothing else from this, I would hope that people spend more time focusing on others in their conversations, in their group, on their team, and getting to understand them, which in effect will build trust, will raise conflicts, good conflicts, it will enhance the relationships and the experience for all involved. And in terms of whether it's citizenship, whether it's company citizenship, whether it's your personal goals and aspirations, paying attention to others is incredibly important. And that's what I'd love to do. That's what I enjoy doing. That's why I do what I do. One of the reasons I do what I do. And I'd encourage everyone to do that. Just go out tomorrow and find out something new about somebody you know. You'll be surprised.
That's a great recommendation and invitation. Thank you, Barry. You mentioned a couple of times that you do trainings, offer seminars and workshops. Is that still something you do? You want to briefly share about what you do, and if someone listening to this conversation and wants to get in touch with you, is that a possibility?
No, it is. Besides coaching, which is a general case, I can usually coach vice presidents and up in corporations, but business owners also work. But the negotiation workshop that I do, this was invented by Ira and Sandy Asherman. They've given it to me since Sandy's been ill, and 10 years ago, and I've been teaching it. So I teach that at major pharma and biotech and device companies. And I also teach at the FDA. And if somebody's in a regulatory or clinical research function, any of the functions in clinical research, and they want to talk to me about that, I'm glad to talk about that. It doesn't have to be contracting. I'm always glad to network too. And so it's those two areas that I'm focused on now. don't do as much strategic planning except for not-for-profits. I did work with Paul and Kid Pan Alley. I'm about to get re-involved with the Philadelphia Folk Song Society, where I'm also a photographer among all these other things. I've been a photographer for over 50 years, and I've been published in a number of places. But I photographed the Philadelphia Folk Festival for over 50 years for their archives for the fest, and been published in several books on that. So I keep doing that as well. I keep thinking about different things I do. It's just whatever I'm interested in at the moment, I just go pick that thing up and do it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're welcome. It's a great joy. And I just wanted to mention that what you shared with us as an invitation to be open to learning, that seems to be something which you are very much living.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. That's it. I've got a couple of meetings tomorrow, one with my nephew, one with someone else who's out of work. That's a family friend. It's if they want to learn something different about how to take care of someone or how to move their career, I'm up for that. It's just helping people be the best they can, helping organizations get what they want.
Thank you, Barry. It has been
Simon.
A great joy. I wish you all the best. Thank you for the inspiration and sharing from your experience and insights with us. And thank you to everybody who was listening and watching our conversation. I wish you all the best and see you soon.
Thank you, Simon. I'll see you. Bye-bye.